It's true.
Yes, Chief.
All right, well, it is 3:01, so let's get this puppy going. I don't need to introduce Esther. Everybody knows who she is. She's the reason that everybody's here. But let's give her a warm welcome. And I am, of course, Michael Pedersen, con chair, and for, God, it's going on decades now. I have been doing the interviews for a lot of the conventions around the East Coast area. And I'm very, very happy I get to add Esther to that list now.
I'm glad to be here.
So you just mentioned it just a minute ago that you had not been going to Sci-Fi Cons before you got started as a pro.
That's right.
So let's go back further then. What, if it wasn't conventions, what was your first real introduction to science fiction?
Well, I owe it all to one of my friends from high school, actually. I went to an all-girls high school, so that was a good thing for me, I think. And unfortunately, I was one of these people who believes the magazines that tell you what you are supposed to like and not like. And at the time, women were given the message that we don't read that stuff, especially not science fiction. And it was okay to read fantasy because 17 gave a good review to The Hobbit. And so I went and I read The Hobbit, and I thought, why, yes, I like this. And I read the trilogy, and yes, I like this. And one of my friends said, well, you should try science fiction. And I go, but I'm a girl. And she said, but I'm a girl too. Here, I'll tell you what. Isaac Asimov, The Caves of Steel.
Oh, good start.
And I read it, and of course, being a confused young girl, developed a crush on the robot. Yes, always go for the unobtainable, it's safer. And then one day, the television is on, I turn the channel and I see, they're doing Tolkien. That's an elf. He's got pointed ears. That's an elf. In about 5 minutes, I realized Shatner was not a hobbit. But I was still fascinated. And yes, I wrote fanfic. And yes, I did a fanzine for my friends because I came into school the next day and said, oh, I saw this wonderful show. It's called Star Trek. I'm in love with a Vulcan. And, well, my friends all said, we know, and get away, so are we. We'll fight you for him. And I put out single-handedly on the, oh God, what is the name of that now gone machine that printed things out in...
Oh, the Mimeos?
The mimeograph, yes. We snuck into the school paper and we used it sub rosa, and it was called Bright Sayings. And I would every week review the episode, and then I would write my own episodes we'd like to see. I actually found the last issue.
Really?
I really did.
Oh, wow.
Sad. But anyway, that was my introduction to science fiction and fantasy.
So you published a fanzine, but you hadn't been part of the fanish culture yet.
It was just in the school.
Had you come across the idea of fanzine somewhere else, or was this a wholly original idea that parallel evolution that you came up with something that all the other fans were doing as well?
Exactly. I had no idea. I just knew, hey, we can steal school supplies, and my typewriter is great for cutting things. God knows it was a terrible typewriter, people. Now you know how old I am. And mimeograph, now you really know. But I had no idea. I didn't know it was called a fanzine. But I did it.
That's cool. And then when did you decide that writing your own short stories was the way to go?
I was 3.
Okay.
I couldn't write them, but I could dictate them, and my mother did a great service or disservice, depending on your point of view, to the world by writing them down and encouraging me. And I knew I was different from other kids because a lot of them were fantasy-oriented stories. One was about a bunny rabbit who was hippity-hopping down the trail, and then all of a sudden things took a very grim turn, because when night came, he came to the haunted house, and the witch wanted to destroy him, but he got her first. So I had 3 years old, a homicidal bunny rabbit. And my parents were just like, that's good, dear, you're being creative, keep it up.
It's cool. It's nice that they supported that.
They did. Oh boy, did they ever.
When did you feel that it was the direction you wanted to go in for a career?
I think from then, I
Yeah.
really would have liked, I wrote so many things. And when I decided I wanted to actually get published, you should have seen what happened. I tried all the different genres. I wrote historical romance. I wrote a murder mystery, and I was sending them over the transom to places.
There's a
And-
phrase you don't hear anymore.
Oh, I know, that's right. You don't even have transoms anymore. And just trying desperately. And the funny thing was, I figured the first genre that sold would be my sign that that's what I'm doing right. And the first thing that sold was a science fiction story to amaze, no wait, it was still Asimov's magazine. And it was a short about a woman who had become a successful romance writer because she had a piece of technology that let the reader experience the part of the heroine. Hijinks ensued when she finally gets rejected and her protagonist shows up at her front door and says, I am here, darling, and stuff like that. But in the novels, first thing that got accepted was a fantasy novel. But while this happened, I got a rejection for my mystery, and they said, well, 2 of our editors wanted it, but the 3rd didn't, but we think you're another Donald Westlake. And right then I proved to the world that I shouldn't have been doing this, because I turned to my husband and said, who's Donald Westlake? Yep, nope, shouldn't have done that.
You've since branched out. You started with fantasy, but then you have covered a lot of genres.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have any favorites to write in? Is it still fantasy, or do you enjoy the other genres as much?
Oh, why don't you just ask me which of my children is
Okay,
my
which is
favorite?
which kid do you like the most?
You sound like my daughter now. But I really enjoy all of them because, haven't you ever been to a good buffet?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so you're not going to just sit there and eat the salad. And, well, some people might just sit there and eat just the dessert, but it gets old.
Do you find any particular one easier to write in than the others?
I think humor is quite easy, but it turns out I'm also very good at revenge stories, where people get their just desserts and we're back to the buffet again. But I don't know. I like to do crossword puzzles, so I like a challenge. I like victory. But sometimes getting a hard victory is really satisfying. So for books where I have to do a lot of research to get it right, or stories where I have to do research to get it right, and it turns out I finally got it right, I am just over the moon. I wrote a fantasy early on, The Witchwood Cradle, and it was a redemption thing, and there were battles, and I was doing a signing, and it was near New London. There's a lot of Navy people there and Coastguard, and here come 2 guys, and they have got the military haircut, and they're in uniform, and one says, I read that book and I have a bone to pick with you, and I'm thinking, I got the battle wrong, I got the military stuff wrong, oh God, oh God. And he says, why did you let her marry him? She was too good for him. I didn't know what to say.
At what point was it where you knew that it had clicked, where you knew that you could make a career out of it?
When I got paid. My mother used to say to me, you can't call yourself an author if you haven't earned money at it. And while we can debate the truth of this, like, hello, Emily Dickinson, it certainly made me focus more and have a goal. And I work very well, really well, when I have deadlines and when I have goals.
You said humor is easy for you. That's I don't hear that from a lot of authors.
Really?
Yeah, it's humor is always tough.
Oh, I don't find it difficult because I guess it's a case of how you're raised. My parents both had wonderful senses of humor, and my father expressed this by choosing the right thing to read to the small child as a bedtime story. Pogo. Walt Kelly's Pogo. And he's laughing at some of the things like the McCarthy. And I don't get it, but playing with words that Walt Kelly did, that sort of thing. And then he insisted we watch Rocky and Bullwinkle together and the Three Stooges. I am that rare thing, the woman who likes the Stooges. And Victor Borge. And all the comedians on the Ed Sullivan Show. Oh God, I'm old.
It's kind of a lost current generation, so we don't have anything like Sullivan anymore. People got exposed to so many different things on a weekly basis like that.
But every generation has their own analog of it. I mean, I'm sure somebody who's watching Ed Sullivan and they're older is saying, well, in my day it was much better. We had the music hall.
Let's talk about some of your fantasy series, some of the more recent ones. Your YA. What was your inspiration for your princess series?
This is a very funny thing. Nothing ever happens to me the way it happens to other people. Like the way I got my first agent was very weird. But for this, I'm trying to remember the anthology. I was invited to write for a young adult anthology that was being published by Random House. And I wrote a story about Helen of Troy because I had a certain opinion about her. She was a Spartan. The Spartans, even though not of Helen's era, because she was Minoan Mycenaean, but the classical Spartans trained the girls as athletically as the boys and had them learning how to throw javelins. And when the men were away at war, the women ran the city. And they did very independent things. And I thought, well, if you've got this kind of a culture, they didn't all of a sudden change from suppressing the women to, hey, let's give them all the power, unfortunately. But I wrote about the episode where Helen is abducted by Theseus. It's kind of a creepy part of her story because in some of the stories, he abducts her when she's 12. So I raised the age and I turned my back on a lot of the even creepier parts of it. And I thought, she's a Spartan. And Theseus, face it, is kind of thick-headed. And I thought, why don't I have her rescue herself? So instead of waiting around for her brothers, Castor and Polydeuces, to show up. So I had her rescue herself. And I get a letter from Random House, and it says, I figure it's about, correcting the manuscript. It says, we really like your story about Helen. Would you like to write a novel? And I gave it to my agent, And he came back and said, "You're going to write 2 novels." And I said, or words to that effect.
And those 2 novels turned into a series.
Yes.
With different princesses.
Mm-hmm.
How did you choose which princesses you wanted to focus on each time?
Oh, well, it was just whoever interested me. After Helen, there was Nefertiti, and I just think she is a fascinating character. Also for, she is historically known to be independent, but I like to wonder about what went into the girlhood, what made the woman that we know. And I tried to do really good research on Egypt at her time. And I learned more about scorpions than I ever really thought I would. And then I don't remember where, I heard about Himiko. Himiko, before the age of the emperors of Japan, and I'm blanking on the name of the culture. I think it was Yayoi culture. She is mentioned in Chinese chronicles, so she existed. She was a shaman, or that is at least how she is represented, and she stopped the various Yayoi groups from warring. So here is this woman who gets all the soldiers, all the warring factions to live in peace, and she establishes contact with the civilization of China at the time. And I thought, what makes a woman like this? What kind of a past? So we have no idea if I was right, but I think I did a good story. And the last one was Queen Maeve of Ireland as a girl. Her story was written down by people who didn't think women should be as strong as she was. And so, well, she got a bad reputation. If you've ever read The Cattle Raid of Cooley, and who hasn't, you get a really interesting picture of this very powerful woman. Not always flattering, but, that was my starting point. Don't know again where I got interested in Maeve, but I sure did. I wish I could have done more.
Let's jump around a little bit more. You wrote 2 Star Trek novels.
I did.
How does that happen? Do you approach them or do they approach you?
In my case, this was funny. The editor at the time, John Ordover, said, "I would like you to write a Star Trek novel." And I said, "Well, very good then, sir." It was a different experience, because I usually do not write out a detailed plan for books. You had to do that, and you had to give it to them for approval to make sure you were honoring canon. And John actually said, "Could you give so-and-so a love interest, or because he never gets one, and could you change this and that?" And I said, "Sure."
First one you wrote was Next Generation?
Yes. But I did get to have a little fun with that. I gave Worf's son a pet hamster.
I was going to bring that up. Yes, you used Worf to very good comic effect in that story. Was that just to lighten up the story, or did you do that because you needed something for Worf?
I don't think it was. I just thought, why not have a little bit of comedy going on, and of course, why not a hamster?
Tell them exactly what you did with that.
The best part of it was, Worf is looking at this little thing, and it looks anyone here ever own a hamster knows that they are stealth evil, absolutely stealth evil. I have had several. And so, of course, Worf scorns the hamster as not being, tough enough. And then he makes the mistake of putting his hand in. And the next thing you know, he's got a hamster fiercely on his finger, and he removes it, and he gives it a Klingon name, which meant I had to contact one of my friends who knows Klingon. In fact, it was Dr. Lawrence Schoen of the Klingon Language Institute. And I said, "How do you say in Klingon Tribble who battles with honor. That is real Klingon in there, people. Real Klingon.
Lawrence was supposed to be here this weekend, but he had
I know.
he had his health problems. So
Yes.
it's a shame. He's a good guy.
Oh, he's wonderful.
You then, after a few more years, you wrote another book in the Trek universe, and
Yes.
you got to go to the original series this time.
No.
Wasn't
It was, oh dear heaven, it was War Child.
Oh, right, that's right.
Yeah. And so, no, that was on the...
Right, Deep Space Nine. That
Yes,
was what the
thank
next one
you.
was, right. How was that experience? Was that
That
as
was
good as the first
about
one?
the same, I will say that, but I tried to put a little bit of, things about, well, even with humor, there are some things in this world that I think need to be addressed, and tried to bring it a little seriousness, a little real world situation.
Yeah, that was dealing with Bajoran refugee camps, so that one was
Yeah.
definitely a little more serious.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Did you miss not being able to play with the original series? Sad.
It would have been fun, but I kind of wonder if it wouldn't have turned into, no, you can't do that. No, that's your. Sounds like a high school girl with a crush on Spock wrote that. I actually did write a fanfic about and it was what I believe is referred to as a Mary Sue.
Okay.
In which there is this, you have to always say, spunky girl who I wondered, now Mr. Spock is half human, half Vulcan. And what if someone like Mr. Spock, who's half human, half Vulcan, marries a full human? So you've only got a quarter Vulcan. Oh my God. I hope I never find that manuscript again. It ended with the, I could not live in your arms, so let me die in them kind of ending, and Mr. Spock alone in his cabin. Oh.
Do you have any Juvenilea stashed away somewhere that you'll be embarrassed by if it comes out after you're gone?
I did clean out the attic, and I think I can trust my children to make a lovely bonfire when this is all over. But you know what? If it comes to light, it comes to light. I won't have to live with it.
You mentioned that your parents made good choices reading to you as a child. What did you read to your kids?
Oh, golly. I really do not remember. They will no doubt, call me to task for it, but they wound up reading themselves pretty early, so that was good. We all love books very much, and I'm seeing the same in my grandchildren. And I am also very happy to see some of the things that, one of them is still too young to be making a lot of her choices, but very into Pokemon.
Okay.
That is a good thing, I think. And Gundam and Dragon Ball and that sort of thing. So it's nice because I think that a lot of manga and anime are wonderful. There's so much there.
So what was your first actual exposure to fandom?
Oh my God. I had published my first story, and it was a friend of mine who came to me and said, "You've never been to a science fiction convention. You should see who's going to be reading your things." And I said, "Okay." And we piled in the car and we drove to Boston, to Boscone. And we walked in, we got there late, so we couldn't get badges. And I look up, there was a balcony, I think it was the Park Plaza Hotel, and there was a Wookiee on the balcony. I had no idea there were going to be Wookiees. And I got that kind of, sort of, people in costumes. Why are they in costumes? I'm not sure. I think I want my mommy. This is outside my comfort zone, maybe. I don't know my comfort zone anymore. And then we retired to the room. It was a zoo room.
Okay.
I had I'm an only child. I'm not used to sleeping with 7 strangers, some of whom were on the floor. I'm not used to having to negotiate my way to the bathroom in the middle of the night, worrying I'm going to step on them. There was a married couple in the other bed. No, nothing happened, but I spent a lot of time like this worrying it was going to, And so I made a bad decision. I hadn't registered. I was getting a little antsy. I said, I have to go home tomorrow. I was going to take the train home. But before I left, my friend Jane had a table in the dealer's room. And I wanted to say goodbye to her, but no badge. And one of the members of NESFA, Priscilla Olson, saw me hesitating outside the door, and I told her what was going on. She said, oh, go in. And I went in to say goodbye to Jane. I came out, and Priscilla said, oh, you're going home. That's too bad. Would you like to see the art show? And I went through the art show, and then she wished me well. And the art show was wonderful. Everything was wonderful. And I wasn't overtired anymore. And the costumes were wonderful. But I had said I had to go home, so I had to follow through. And as the cab is pulling away, all I can think of is, that was a terrible choice. You have to go back to these conventions. And I did.
So when you went back and you chose on your own rather than being recommended by a friend, where did you go?
Oh gosh, I really don't remember what my next one was, but I know I went to LunaCon when it still existed and when Isaac Asimov still was there. And he made up a limerick about me, which I promptly forgot, so I'm sorry.
How were your interactions with the good doctor?
Oh, it was just fine. He didn't flirt with me at all. What the heck?
Let's take about halfway. Let's go ahead and go out to the audience, see if anyone has any questions out there real quick. It's a quiet bunch today. Yeah, Sean.
I just always love hearing the story about how you first pitched the Chicks anthology. I know you just told it in the Baen Roadshow, but...
Well, it was at a BossCon, and I was with a group of friends, and I was in the art show. You know, the BossCon art show has a lot to answer for. They're responsible for me being here and for Chicks. Third strike, and I don't know. But my friends were looking at one of those paintings from a cover of a book where you have the woman warrior and not too much, although she had a wonderful helmet, as I recall, and she's holding her sword and her shield in a way that basically says, hi, I'm ready to be stabbed. And so they're arguing about it, and I'm wandering off to look at other paintings, and I don't know why to this day. I think I'm going to blame my muse. I think my muse is a juvenile delinquent who is wearing an ill-fitting black leather jacket and bumming smokes from passers-by. And my muse decided to have me start thinking about the old women in prison movies, which was a whole genre. And I, for some reason, was thinking in a literative manner. I thought, wouldn't it be fun to do an anthology, but with a fantasy or science fiction twist about, good idea for a title, Babes Behind Bars. And I'm thinking about it and suddenly realized this is not gonna, and then the muse asked me for a Chesterfield, and I gave her one, and she said, no babes behind bars, chicks in chainmail. And I went scurrying back to my friends and going, chicks in chainmail? Oh, isn't this going to be a great thing? And it can be about women and armor, but funny, because I felt I'd come across one too many grim woman warriors. And humor's everywhere, so why not for them? And I ran into Toni Weisskopf. I don't think it was at BossCon, though, and I pitched this. And she thought it was a very good idea. And
that's right up her alley.
I'm sorry?
That is right up Tony's alley.
Oh,
Yeah.
good. Well,
Yeah.
it was, I'll
Yeah.
say. And she took it to Jim Baen, and he liked the idea, but he wanted a different title because, well, there was some trepidation about, chicks in chainmail were going to get in trouble. And she persuaded him that, in view of some of the other Baen titles at the time about future vampires, Tomorrow Bites and Tomorrow Sucks, that we should do this thing. And he said yes, but he wanted a disclaimer that it wasn't his fault. And it was put on the back of the book. Now, I will say something I forgot to mention when I was talking about this before. I felt, since I was editing this book, I was not going to have a story in it. I just wasn't. It wasn't fair. So that's fine, and I get wonderful stories in, and I did ask for recommendations from Baen for people to put in. At the time, I had terrible myopia, and I couldn't do an open submission. My eyes would have fallen out. So I really appreciated the help from Baen Books. And Tony met me at another convention, a Lunacon, and she gives me the cover flat. And on the cover flat it says, stories from Anne Friesner herself. Tony, I got good news and bad news. And the bad news is, no, I'm not in here. I explain. Good news is I can write a story. And I did. And for every single one afterwards, I always asked. Because it isn't fair, I felt, to put myself in when I had the say-so over it. I didn't want to do bad work. But there it was. And on the third book, Jim gave me the disclaimer cause he named it Chicks and Chained Males.
And the most recent one that came out, you did not edit.
Nope.
So it's carried on past you.
That's fine.
But Jason Cordova, one of our own, a Ravencon regular,
Oh, cool.
and Virginia author. So it was in good hands this year. I haven't read it yet.
Well,
I gotta get a copy of that.
he was
Yeah.
wonderful because he had the honor and courtesy to ask me if it was okay with me.
He's a good guy.
Yes,
Yeah.
he is.
Let's see, what else shall we talk about? Let's as long as we're on editing, you've done more than just the Chicks and Chainmail. How was that different for you?
Editing is very, the actual process of editing, I am not a very hands-on
Yeah.
editor. Some editors do go right into the story and tell you to change things and that. I usually have enough to pick and choose from. I tell people that even though there's an invitation, if the story is not right for the anthology, then please understand. And they have all been, with very few exceptions, professional about that and say that's okay. One of the hard parts of being an editor is if you get too many stories that are perfect for the anthology.
Yeah.
So editing also, science fiction, everybody knows everybody among the writers, more or less. So you're dealing with a situation where you may have to tell one of your friends, and a close friend at that, I'm sorry, this just didn't work.
I just said the exact same thing on my last panel.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's we did the Ravencon Anthology, and it's all my friends that I invited to and it's difficult when you know the authors. It's
Very,
Yeah.
very.
sometimes it can be intimidating just reading it.
Mhm.
If I don't like it, what am I going to say to them?
Exactly.
But you've been lucky with that, though.
I really have. I think that in the whole process there might have been one incident, and that was that although I had this one anthology, I wanted to do a horror anthology about vampires and artists.
Yeah.
Because, there is a kinship in there. And it was going to be my first attempt at an over-the-transom thing. And It was called Blood Muse. I got so darn many good stories for so many different kinds of art. I mean, I got 2 stories about tattoo artists, both of whom were from the same cultural background, the artists, not the writers. And I wanted to have, a variation, but I had so many of these, and I contacted my agent. I said, I don't know what I'm going to do. And he contacted the publisher, and the publisher said, we'll do 2 books, and they'll fit. And I said, hooray. And I went to Europe with my kids to go to the Worldcon in Glasgow, and also to show them France and Spain, because I'd traveled as a kid and I wanted them. And I'm in Spain, and I get a phone call from my husband, who is at home, and he says, yeah, you have to call the publisher. They're not going to do 2 books. They wanted me to winnow out half the books, half the stories. I happily said, I can't do that. I'm in Spain, and there is no internet. And anyway, I'm with children. No, I can't do it. Tell them to make the call. But to sell a story and then have it taken away from you, I can't even begin to imagine how that felt. And by the way, for that anthology, I didn't have a story because, again, and some of the stories resold. And I believe the people got paid anyway, but that was the situation.
You told me a few weeks ago about aspiring to get into astounding.
Oh, I think you mean fantasy.
Well,
and
that's right. It was
science fiction.
Yes, that's.
I know where this is going.
Yes. What was the story that you got to them?
Well, it was humor. I didn't think fantasy and science fiction, they were very serious, I thought, very artistic. And I kept sending things and getting rejected. And then I sent something where I just plain decided the heck with it and sent humor, and they said, almost. And I wrote a story set in a trailer park, except what is happening in the trailer park is a parallel version of a number of stories by an author, Edgar Allan Poe. And the name of the story was Poe, White Trash. And there was no Cask of Amontillado, I'm sorry. There was a 6-pack of beer involved. I don't remember if the black cat was involved either. It's been a while. And they took it.
Who was editing at the time?
Ed Furman.
Okay.
And every time the fantasy and science fiction editorship shifted, I would hope that they would still take humor.
Yeah. Let's go back to the audience. Anyone else?
Anybody?
The Chicks and Chainmail series, which is just about a trademark and everything like that. And when I saw it, when I was a youth, I saw it on the shelf, and I was intrigued, but I didn't want to be seen as that guy that buys, a book for the sake of the skin. And did you find yourself steeling yourself for interactions of people that didn't bother to reading the book and judge the book by the cover? How did you prepare for that possibility as you were being published?
I don't think that I ever had anything like that happen, really. And I've been very grateful for all of my book covers that have gotten things right. And frankly, for the Chicks and Chainmail series, I thought that art was appropriate to what was being said in the stories. Oh, there's another funny thing about that. For the first anthology, almost no male authors wanted to participate. They were afraid they'd be thought of as
Yeah.
that guy. They got over it. We had some wonderful stories from guys.
So are you working on anything right now?
Well, let me see. I'm thinking about doing a standalone or maybe turn into a series, young adult, with some, not in the Percy Jackson way, but with ties to Greek mythology. But I cannot say anything more about that. And I started writing an Arthurian novel long ago, and it got sidelined. I sent a few pages to my then agent, to my present agent, and wondering what he'd say. I want to know, am I wasting my time? And what he said was, finish this. Well, I should finish that. It's coming along really well. I am waiting to hear from a magazine about a story I sent in. I just have a lot of things on the fire,
Okay.
which is good and bad because it keeps me out of the pool halls, and it's bad because I'm running around instead of focusing on one. But I get more done and I don't get bored that way.
That's important.
I've got some stories coming out in anthologies. There's a Future Jews anthology that's coming out, and oh my goodness, I just, and of course I participate a lot in Unidentified Funny Objects, which is a series. It's a magazine. Well, it's more like a softcover book magazine. Alex Schwartzman edits it. Wonderful collections of funny stories. Oh, I read a story today from the Zombies Need Brains line. Well, that's the noir,
Yeah.
is one of them. But there's one coming out called Dragonesque. And I think I may have some people in the audience who heard the story and thought well of it. So it's called Slay. It's different. Boy, is it different.
We've talked a lot about humor, but you don't write just humor.
Nope.
You've won a Nebula,
Two.
too, yeah.
Yeah.
You've been
yeah.
multiply nominated for several.
I have,
Yeah.
yes.
What was it like getting that first nomination?
Well, the first nomination, I think it was, I forgot the name of the thing. But I went to the thing, it was in, I think it was near Seattle, it was in the Pacific Northwest. And there I was, and I lost. But I lost to Joe Haldeman. If you're going to
Yeah.
lose to somebody you admire.
Yeah. Good writer, good guy.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, definitely. Second time, I think I did win it. It was very funny, though, because it was on the Queen Mary that was docked, and we had it was a gorgeous place, and there was a little party the day before. And the person who made the Nebula trophies introduced himself to me, and I said hi, and he said, would I have heard of you? Or I don't think I've heard of you. And I thought, well, he makes the award, and he hasn't heard of me, and that means I lost. I can enjoy my dinner now. No pressure, no tension. And I was on my second glass of a lovely white wine when I won. And I went up and I got this thing and I looked at it and it was beautiful. And I was so happy because I like pretty things.
Yeah.
And the next time I won it was in Kansas City. But in both cases, the stories that I wrote, well, one of them, okay, I remember, Death and the Librarian. I used to do readings of Death and the Librarian at conventions, and when I'd look up, there'd be tears out there in the audience. And I'm horrible. It made me happy. I made them cry. And I enjoyed writing that story. and the other one was a birthday. And considering the way things are going for women's reproductive rights right now, I was way ahead of my time, unfortunately.
Are there any stories that you've wanted to tell over the years you just haven't gotten down yet?
Probably.
Yeah.
I mean,
Is there something that you've really wanted to write that you just haven't felt that you've been able to get it down?
Well, there was one thing, there were a number of things that would have been historicals, or historical romances, but based on, one would be based on Chaucer, and one would be based on Shakespeare, one of his plays. And I do hope to do that one sometime. I like to take the side characters and see what were they doing, what were they thinking. Every year we read the story of the sacrifice of Isaac, the near sacrifice of Isaac. And I'm the person who's sitting there thinking, so Abraham takes Isaac and 2 servants and leaves the servants to mind the donkey. And they say, and he says, I'll be back, we're going up to, and what were those 2 men talking about while they're waiting? And that could be a fun story to write. Not quite waiting for Godot, but.
Has religion been a big factor in your writing?
Oh boy, sometimes, I wrote 2 novels, and I wanted to write more in the series, dystopian novels. The Psalms of Herod and the Sword of Mary, in which ecological circumstances have caused people to have to make some terrible, terrible adjustments, all of which, by the way, have happened already in history in one way or another, which is really, really scary. And I wanted to, White Wolf, the gaming company, also had White Wolf Press, and they actually had people who were picking up these books, seeing my name, but seeing the cover design and going, this doesn't look funny. And this wasn't funny. And I actually got an irate letter from somebody about this, you have terrified my child. I said, there is inside the book, White Wolf put a warning about the content of this. Why don't you pay attention? I didn't answer back because, and very recently we went to an event where N.K. Jemisin was, giving a wonderful talk. It was brilliant. And I'm introduced to her, and she says, I read those books. You scared me. And so I had one of her books, which she signed, to Esther. Yeah. You scared me. So that was very satisfying to know. But in the books, religion was twisted to justify the horrors that the people were having to perform to survive. And I had not fun exactly, but a great deal of satisfaction writing these books and writing the parallel psalms and poems and songs at the start of each chapter that would have been part of this culture. But I really wanted to see if I could do more than just this little enclave and go on into the world. I had plans for 5 books.
Oh, well. A lot of people complain about being stereotyped, but it doesn't sound like, you've got a reputation for fiction, but it doesn't sound like it's really pigeonholed you, I think.
I hate pigeonholes. Yeah. They're boring to me. I forget who wrote this poem, but it may have been D.H. Lawrence, I don't know, which surprised me. The poem goes, he found the formula for drawing comic rabbits. The formula for drawing comic rabbits paid. So in the end, he could not shake the tragic habits the formula for drawing comic rabbits made. I don't want to be stuck drawing comic rabbits.
And you haven't.
Yay!
Yeah, which is good.
Just
hey, we're actually
powerful
just over
ways.
time. That went quick.
Yes.
Does anyone else in the audience have anything they want to ask before we wrap it up?
We scared them.
We did. They're timid.
Yes, like comic rabbits.
Yeah. Well, thanks a lot, everybody.
Thank you.
That went